Good evening, and welcome to the Boston Public Library's Local History Lecture Series. As part of our program, we want to read the following statement to bring attention to the land which we use for our building and events. We acknowledge that the Boston Public Library's Central Library stands on land that was once a water-based ecosystem providing sustenance for the indigenous Massachusetts people, and is a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. We are committed to land acknowledgements for all locations at which we operate. We reaffirm this commitment to set the context for our planning, deliberations, and public engagement, which will take place from the spirit of welcome and respect found in our motto, Free to All. Tonight, we are very pleased to have David Krell here to talk about his book, Nuff Said, The Story of Michael McGreevy, Baseball's First Superfan. David Krell is an author, speaker, and former producer at MSNBC. He is the author of 2 baseball books being published this year, Bo Belinsky, The Rise, Fall, and Rebound of a Playboy Pitcher, and 1978, Baseball in America in the Disco Era. He also has 2 earlier books. His 2024 book, The Fenway Effect, A Cultural History of Boston's Red Sox, was called a fascinating and fun read from start to finish by the Midwest Book Review. In 9, a journal of baseball history and culture, reviewer Mark McGee said this about David's 2021 book, 1962, Baseball in America and the Time of JFK. After reading Krell's book, you will not only know what it was like to be there, but you will think you were actually there. Questions will be taken at the end of the lecture, which is being recorded, and please wait for the microphone so we can record what you're saying. Copies of the Fenway book and others will be available for sale and signing after the program, up in the lobby. David.
Let's give a round of applause for Diane and also Jay, who's in the control room. I want to start with a question, and I want you to talk to whomever is around you, left, right, backwards, forwards, in front or back, about your answer to this question. If you were going to talk about the Red Sox to somebody who knew nothing about the Red Sox, what topic would you start with? It could be the 75 team, the 67 team, the Jimmy Fund, Ted Williams. Talk amongst yourselves for 1 minute, and then we'll regroup. Okay, let's get some class participation going. Bill and Deb, you want to kick us off? What's your topic?
Mine was the 2003 team.
2003 team, okay.
I said Fenway Park.
Fenway Park, can't go wrong. Who else? Let me see some class participation. Yeah, Mark. 75 team. I saw a hand over here. 2 people, one and then the other.
18, the World Series.
1918 World Series? Oh, wait, what was that? Oh, Mookie, okay.
You said 1918.
I thought I heard, that's what I thought I heard. Yes, sir.
1986.
86, okay. Boo, well, he's wearing a Mets jersey. Anyone else? Over here? Yeah.
Probably just the
The drought. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. What about over here?
We're not from these parts.
Okay. Well, these folks can educate you after the lecture. Yes, sir.
04, because my dad grew up his whole life, he was a Red Sox fan, and it was umpteen decades before he got to see.
Wow. I want to show some slides of some other possible topics and some that you mentioned or were too shy to mention. The Jimmy Fund. You can't go wrong talking about the Jimmy Fund and the Red Sox. Ted Williams, probably the greatest hitter who ever lived. Cy Young. I think there's a statue of him at Northeastern, if I'm not mistaken, or a plaque. Is it a statue? Okay. The Babe, before the dreaded sale to the Yankees. The 67 team, pretty good artwork there. The 75 team, somebody mentioned. You mentioned that, Mark, right? More artwork that's pretty damn good. Narragansett, who's old enough to remember Narragansett beer? Longtime sponsor of the Red Sox, pretty much synonymous with the Red Sox. Kurt Gowdy starting the broadcast saying, "Hi neighbor, have a Gansett." And of course, enough said McGreevy. Jay, can we put up the second set of slides? Enough said, McGreevy, in my opinion, should have a statue at Fenway Park. There are other people throughout baseball. Well, that's the last slide. We want to get to the first slide. Well, sorry, I'm going to have to ask Jay's indulgence. I'm from the analog world, not the digital world. There we go. Thank you, Jay. Nufsin McGreevy was largely responsible for the fervor in the fan base, maybe even creating the fan base in Boston in the late 19th century and the early 20th century. There was a newspaper, it doesn't exist anymore, the Boston Daily Record, and there was a sports writer who had a column, Dave Egan, and he advocated, when McGreevy died in the 40s, he advocated for McGreevy to be in the Hall of Fame. Now, maybe that might happen someday, where non-players, non-owners, non-executives, non-managers get in. It took decades for Marvin Miller to get in. Does anyone know who Mary Dobkin is? I saw an Orioles hat. Do you know who Mary Dobkin is? Aunt Mary? She was a woman whom Gene Stapleton portrayed in a TV movie, and she was responsible for inner city kids having baseball teams because they couldn't afford to go to camp and things of that nature. She should have a statue at Camden Yards. So people like McGreevy and Dobkin hopefully will get their just due someday. How did he get the name Nuff Said? Well, there are two schools of thought. He owned a bar, and the bar was called Third Base. And what happens in a bar, whether you're talking about 1890 or 2025, people drink and sometimes they get out of hand. So to stop an argument, he would say, "Enough said." Shortened version, "Nuff said." The other school of thought is that McGreevy would make a declaration and say, "Nuff said," as the exclamation point for his statement. Jimmy Collins is the best manager in baseball, nuff said. Nobody else could debate it. Third Base was the name of the saloon, and the slogan had the same meaning, in a sense, at the saloon as it does in baseball. What is the bar? What is third base? It's the last stop before home. At the Boston Public Library, we have the good fortune of the McGreevy collection, a treasure trove of photographs, some items that he bestowed to the library for safekeeping. A lot of the material is available online. So I'm going to show you some of the slides from that collection online. But if you are in the area, I encourage you to make an appointment with the Special Collections Department and go through the material. I went through some of it myself this morning, and it's fascinating. So here is Nuff Said McGreevy in the middle of what appears to be an amateur team. I do not know why the gentleman on the bottom left has a jersey that says Roxbury, but the rest of the folks have Nuff Said jerseys. Here is the saloon. Looks pretty much like any saloon today. Prices will be a little different. And here are some team photos that he had in his collection. I mean, I get a kick out of this, the way policemen were dressed 120 years ago. Now, merchandising, marketing, these activities did not just begin after World War II. They were around 120 years ago. Here is a card that McGreevy apparently would hand out with his name and likeness and song lyrics on the back. And you see Nuff Said spelled a different way at the bottom with the name of his saloon. Tessie, any Red Sox fan knows that Tessie is a big song in the repertoire of sports music. And here you have Nuff Said the way we normally spell it, and the name of the saloon again. And at the top it says Rooter's Souvenir. Opening day 1904, this is a very important historic photograph. The Boston Americans, as they were known, won the World Series against the Pirates in 1903, the first modern day World Series. So of course, opening day when you raise the flag is a big day in any sport, hockey, baseball, basketball, football. Raising the banner, it just gives you chills. McGreevy was tight with the players. I don't know of any fans today who can just hang out with players during spring training. The Royal Rooters. Now, this is one of McGreevy's major accomplishments. He was so passionate about baseball in Boston, he commanded a group of people to go to the ballpark and play instruments. Not only that, they did it at other ballparks. And we're going to see a slide in a few minutes, a photograph of the Royal Rooters in Baltimore. Now, today, in 2025, to go from Baltimore to Boston would probably take around 7 hours on the train. By car, I don't know how some of you drive, maybe it would be 6 hours. Imagine what it was like 110, 120 years ago. That's how emotional this fan base was regarding the Red Sox. Here you have the Boston Bean Eaters, another artifact of 19th century baseball in the collection. And here is a photograph of the Royal Rooters at Utah House, 1897. That's quite a gathering. Groundbreaking ceremony for the Huntington Avenue grounds. Very important. This was, of course, the ballpark. Mark knows this, before Fenway Park. Am I right that the South End grounds were pretty close? This is one of my favorite stadium shots, an overhead shot, Huntington Avenue grounds, right before the team switched to Fenway. Fenway opens the following year, and you see the advertising just like today, big billboards. McGreevy was not limited to collecting memorabilia or photographs of Boston teams. Here you have the St. Louis Browns in the American League. The White Sox, formerly known as the White Stockings. The Highlanders, predecessor to the Yankees. The A's, there's Connie Mack, I believe, in the middle, a very young Connie Mack. The Boston Americans with Jimmy Collins in the middle. Jimmy Collins, possibly one of the unsung players and managers, not only in Red Sox history, but in baseball history. And here are some players that you may have heard of. Look how serious they look. The 1890s Orioles had a dynasty in the National League. Wee Willie Keeler, John McGraw, King Kelly, and Huey Jennings were vital parts of that dynasty. Dressed very well, not like today. And here's Michael King Kelly. I believe that he is rumored to be the basis for Casey and Casey at the Bat. Here's another picture of Jimmy Collins. I think that's the same picture from the group photo. Nap Lajoie, Hall of Famer. And when the 100th anniversary of baseball occurred in 1939, of course, Filing's department, as well as I'm sure other stores across the country, commemorated it. And you can see some of the items. And if you look real close, right at the top, in the middle of this display, is a picture of Nuff Said McGreevy. I don't know if you can make that out from where, can you see that? And then some of the other pictures that are in his collection. So he died not too long after that. And I just want to keep that up for a minute. Every team is tribal, right? Every team is tribal. Every team has customs. Every city has customs. In Milwaukee, they have the Bratwurst races. In Washington, they have the President's races. I think the Mets are incorporating a race like a taxi cab and a slice of pizza this year, the mascot races. But at the heart of that is community. And if you think about between 1880 and say 1930, when there was such a tremendous influx of immigrants coming to this country, how did they participate in the local customs? How did they assimilate into America in Boston, in Philadelphia, in New York, in Brooklyn, which until 1898, which was its own city, all up and down the East Coast, and then further geographically in the Midwest. They went to the ballpark, or they learned English by reading the newspaper. I wrote a book about the Brooklyn Dodgers, and one gentleman told me that when he was a kid, he would listen to the radio, and his grandmother, who was an immigrant from Eastern Europe, she did not understand English all that well, and she lived with them. So he was a 10-year-old boy listening to the radio, but the grandmother knew that the gentleman on the radio sounded intelligent. It was Vin Scully. And she just knew from the tenor of his voice and how he spoke, he sounded very intelligent. And that was a part of the community of baseball, just like Kurt Gowdy was part of the community in Boston for many, many years. Baseball, football, hockey, soccer, any sport is tribal, and you go to the ballpark to celebrate. You wear the jersey to celebrate, to be part of a community. And that's, I think, the lesson of Nuff Said McGreevy. He wanted people to participate in both teams. I mean, Boston did have two teams for quite some time, but it seems at a certain point that it veered more towards the Red Sox. And he just wanted people to feel a part of that. Was there a business component? Absolutely. You saw the souvenir cards. He's handing them out. He wants to drum up business. What do you talk about in a bar? Whether it's 1890, 1920, or 2025, largely you're talking about sports. It's not going to be any different. And I just hope that people understand that at the heart of Red Sox Nation, it probably started with Nuff Said McGreevy. Some people think it started in 67. Some people might say 75. But for my money, it really started with a bar owner putting his emotions on the line and getting other people involved to the point where they're taking train trips to Baltimore, which I guarantee you was not the train trips that we take today. And just think about that. Think about the hours they had to endure. And for them, that might have been luxury because they weren't able to do that 40 years before. So I hope that if you're in the Boston area, that you can go to the special collections, see some of the photographs that I've seen. I held in my hands today a ticket book. The tickets are all gone, but it was from 1906, a season ticket book, and it was incredible to hold something that was 120 years old. I'd like to close with a poem and a PowerPoint. I am from the analog world. I've had to get into the digital world, so if my words don't quite match the slide, please just indulge me for a second or two until I catch up. Jay, can we get the third set of slides? By the way, just to reiterate, there's a very nice young man named Derek who is monitoring the table outside. If you want to buy any of my books, I will stay until every last book is signed, and Derek will facilitate the sale. I'm happy to talk to you afterwards as well. And after I finish the poem, of course, we're going to have Q&A if you have any questions, comments, or rebuttal. This is the first box score for the Boston National League team. This is called Ode to the Red Sox. In 1871, Boston's professional baseball journey began. The team was known as the Red Stockings. It was quite a clan. The name changed several times. Bean Eaters, Doves, and Rustlers, also known as Bees and Braves, they were terrific hustlers. The Braves moniker stuck, but the team left for Milwaukee in 1953. Boston still had its American League team to create joy, catharsis, and glee. The Red Sox history began in 1901. Their home field was Huntington Avenue grounds. Fans had passion for the squad, surpassing others by leaps and bounds. First called the Americans, they won the first World Series against the Pirates. The south side of Boston could truly be considered their Emirates. Boston's players included Collins, Hooper, and a fireballer named Ruth. Nuff Said McGreevy was baseball's first superfan. His passion was his truth. Fenway Park became their home in 1912, a storied ballpark for sure. The team won another World Series that year. Hope and optimism were pure. The Braves won in 1914, the Red Sox 3 times in the next 4 years. When teams faced Boston's AL9, it's safe to say they had fears. The Red Sox sold Ruth to the Yankees in a deal believed to begin a curse. Sox fans stayed with their team like a marriage, for better or for worse. Ted Williams had a fantastic rookie year in 1939, leading the majors in RBIs. He served in the Marines during World War II, returning in '46 to pursue another prize. The World Series against the St. Louis Cardinals went the full 7 games. Alas, Boston lost, but fans kept faith in the team's aims. Boston had built a legacy with Grove, Cronin, Dorr, and Fox. The bonds strengthened every year between New England and the beloved Sox. The Braves began a partnership with the Jimmy Fund, which the Red Sox inherited. Williams and Cronin were persuasive, about cancer research, an initiative that's merited. A black mark on the Sox is Tom Yawkey's lacking approach to integration. It didn't happen until 1959 when Pumpsie Green joined Red Sox Nation. Gowdy, Martin, and Parnell announced every strike, run, error, and hit. They opened their broadcasts with the sponsor's slogan, "Hi, neighbor, have a Gansett." The 60s were a time of mediocrity until 1967. After so many years of toiling, it must have felt like heaven. Yaz won the Triple Crown, and Lonborg topped the majors with 22 victories. But the 67 Sox had more to celebrate as they pursued baseball glories. They won the American League pennant and faced the Cardinals yet again. Gibson, Brock, Cepeda, and Flood were obstacles for Boston's baseball men. Red Sox players offered hope across Boston for every child, woman, and fella. They lost the series in 7 games. The season received the adjective of Cinderella. They made it back to the World Series in '75 looking for the elusive win. The players were baseball sensations, highlighted by Evans, Rice, and Lynn. Game 6 was an epic contest, perhaps the best baseball game of all time. Fisk's home run over the Green Monster won in the 12th inning. It was truly sublime. Game 7 score was 4-3. Boston lost in quite a dramatic fashion. Morgan had the game-winning RBI in the top of the 9th. Sox fans retained their passion. Boston had a massive lead in July '78, but it diminished, to say the least. The Yankees tied at the end of the season, requiring a 1-game playoff for the AL East. The rivals from New York won 5-4, thanks to homers by guys named Reggie and Bucky. Red Sox fans from Providence to Portland will say that they got lucky. A World Series opportunity emerged in 1986. With a stellar season for the Sox, excitement was palpable from Copley Square down to the port and docks. Clemens led the majors with 24 wins in the AL with an ERA of 2.48. Red Sox Nation believed a path to a World Series title was true and straight. They faced the Mets, a formidable team from the National League. Gooden, Carter, Strawberry, and Hernandez refused to submit to fatigue. Boston led 3-2 as Game 6 neared an end. The score was tied 3-3 after 9. Neither team would bend. In the 10th inning, the Red Sox scored runs 4 and 5. Champagne was set up in the locker room. NBC prepared to go on the air live. The Shea Stadium scoreboard flashed a message of congratulations. New Englanders got ready to celebrate with plenty of libations. The first 2 batters for the Mets flied out before an unpredictable comeback. 3 singles, a wild pitch, and Buckner's error amounted to a shellac. The Mets scored 3 runs and won Game 6 by a score of 6-5. Boston had another chance in Game 7, keeping hope alive. But baseball's fates had other ideas. The Mets won the championship. Though fans felt let down by the Sox, nothing could ruin their relationship. They remained steadfast in their devotion to the team, more than 80 years old. After every baseball season, thoughts of next year kept them warm during winter's cold. The Sox won the World Series in 2004, breaking the so-called curse. Ask any Sox fan about the team's history. You'll hear it chapter and verse. From the early days of Huntington Avenue grounds to Fenway's landmark status, Sox fans embrace the team's history as part of their emotional apparatus. The Red Sox have a tremendous impact on culture, from fever pitch to cheers. The statues at Fenway and Sweet Caroline remind us that the Sox persevere. Being a part of Red Sox Nation is being part of a beautiful, wonderful sect, and I decided to chronicle it all in a book called The Fenway Effect. Thank you. Diane is going to patrol with a microphone. If you have any questions or comments, don't be shy.
Did you try to do any objective analysis of different fan bases, I don't know, percentage of people in an area that, in a TV market that follow a team or that sort of thing?
Well, I'll tell you this, Bill. I had edited 2 anthologies about the Mets and the Yankees in popular culture. I wanted to write about a team myself, and it came down to the Cubs, the Dodgers, and the Red Sox. The Dodgers were out because I had tried to get Dodgers fans involved in my books about 1962 and 1966, and I didn't have much luck. The Cubs and the Red Sox are similar. Ballparks debuted around the same time, massive droughts between World Series titles, passionate fan bases. But I just had a feeling about the Red Sox. I knew the history a little bit better, growing up in northern New Jersey, seeing all those Yankees-Red Sox games, the rivalry. I remember the Bucky Dent home run. And I just had a feeling that there would be an outpouring. And I was proven right, because when I put the word out that I was doing this book and I needed an oral history chapter from the fans, people were just coming out of, people I didn't even know. Friends of friends, family of friends, and so on. And when I sent out a questionnaire, I did not get back paragraphs in response to my questions. I got back pages. And I don't mean 3 pages. I mean 8 pages. So they had to be truncated, but in answer to your question, I had more than one person say, David, ask my wife when I talk about the Sox, I can't stop. So I did not do any objective analysis. I went with my gut. And maybe someday I'll write a book about the Cubs and incorporate an oral history. But for the moment, I'm very glad that I did this one, and I'm trying to launch volume 2.
Are there any traditions that Boston has around celebrating a win? So I'm a Phillies fan. One of our traditions that we hold near and dear is climbing poles. So I was just curious if Boston has any quirky traditions in regards to celebrating big wins.
Well, the music, right? I mean, the music is big, and when you go to a game at Fenway Park, I went to opening day a couple of years ago, and I write about that in the introduction. It's palpable. And I've been to both stadiums, Veteran Stadium and the new stadium for the Phillies. I've been to Citi Field, I've been to Yankee Stadium, and there's excitement, to be sure, but there's something different about Fenway. There's something that's almost palpable, that if you were a stranger and you went up to 10 people, you might have 10 invitations for dinner that night. There's a communal feeling that without getting too romantic about it, there is a communal feeling that I haven't seen at other ballparks. The Red Sox have had so much tsuris, as my grandmother would say, throughout the years. I'm glad they finally won in 2004, and they've had some amazing players, but some of these people would be able to more directly answer your question. Are there any traditions that you all have? Not one in particular, okay. Dirty Water, okay, by the Standells. When they win.
They got pretty good at winning championships here, so they understood how to do crowd control here. So there isn't anything like Philadelphia, which will eventually get better as they keep winning.
Yeah.
But in 2004, somebody died because of this. I believe it was the case that the cops and some students got in a confrontation. They shot a rubber bullet, and the bullet bounced up and killed somebody.
Yeah.
And now the city has cracked down quite a bit on this. I do have a different kind of question, though, David.
Okay.
Do you have any data or evidence about the ethnic breakdown of who followed the Braves and who followed the Red Sox? This is a pretty tribal city, so I'm interested to see what you would have on that.
Wait, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so Boston's a pretty tribal city. It's a city of neighborhoods. And
Right.
so my question is, does that translate into who followed the Braves and who followed the Red Sox?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't have any data to support whether a certain neighborhood veered toward one team or the other. But when the Braves left for Milwaukee in the early 50s, my assumption, and I could be wrong, my assumption is that people transferred their loyalties to the Red Sox. It wasn't that way in New York when the Giants and the Dodgers left. People didn't automatically become Yankees fans. A lot of people became Mets fans when the Mets debuted in '62. So it was a little different in Boston. Plus, the Red Sox assuming the Jimmy Fund, I'm sure, had a lot to do with that. But that's an interesting question.
Just to follow up on what you're saying, my sister's boyfriend is a Braves fan. He's from New York, but his father's from Boston, and I guess it stuck with him the whole time.
Right.
I think he's a fan of. There's another team I forget that was from Boston and not there anymore, but yeah, he's like an Atlanta fan now, which is funny.
Well, that's not altogether unusual. I know plenty of San Francisco Giants fans who were once upon a time New York Giants fans.
Right, but two cities though. He followed him to Milwaukee, and then my grandfather was a Giants fan. Grew up in Brooklyn though. I don't know how that happened.
Right.
But yeah, I was always wondering that.
Well, to go from Milwaukee and then to Atlanta to follow them, that takes a lot of commitment, to be sure. Oh, I think over here, Diane.
Did Boston ever have a Negro League team?
I think, Mark, I'm going to defer to you on that. No, I don't think so.
No. And then just a question about your book about disco.
Yeah,
Does it talk about Disco Destruction Night?
that happened in '79 in
And this
Chicago.
was
Are you
just-
referring to Chicago?
I thought it was Detroit.
No, in Chicago, what the young woman is referring to is Disco Demolition Night, where a DJ told people to go to the White Sox game and bring their records and destroy them, and they created such havoc on the field that the announcers were begging them to get off. I mean, they destroyed the field, thousands of dollars of damage. It was a promotion gone awry, probably one of the greatest, and I don't say the word greatest in a positive sense, but one of the greatest flops in terms of a promotion. People didn't expect it to get so violent. But no, that happened in '79.
Just also following on that, like when you see videos of people jumping on the field after a team wins the World Series, when did that kind of end?
I think that started to end in the 80s, because in the '86 series, I remember there were police horses lined up at Shea. And in '76, when Chambliss hit his home run in the playoff to send the Yankees to the World Series, the fans mobbed the field. They mobbed the field in '69 when the Mets won the World Series. So I don't have a date for you, but sometime in the '80s, somebody said enough's enough. I don't know if it was the commissioner forcing the owners or the owners lobbying the commissioner, but something had to be done. It's a pretty sad commentary that you have to have 40 police horses pushing as a symbol of strength for people not to tear up their own ballpark. You never saw that in the 40s or 50s.
I suspect the players were part of the pressure to keep the fans.
Well, and the players were scared. If you see Chambliss running, and there's a video of Reggie Jackson when he was with the Yankees calling on his old football skills, and it looks funny in one respect when you're a kid. When you look at it as an adult and you put yourself in the player's shoes and you realize, hey, he could have been seriously hurt. Because if one guy comes up to you and pats you on the back, 7 others think they could do the same thing, all of a sudden you're tripping and breaking an ankle, it's not so funny anymore. Yes?
I'm just looking at the cover of the book, and I kind of know, like, people sell apparel with the Citgo sign as kind of synonymous for, like,
Yes.
Red Sox gear. When did that really start to take effect, that Citgo is Fenway and Red Sox and kind of vice versa?
Well, there just happens to be a chapter in the book, and for $34.95, you can find out the whole story. It dates back to the early 40s when it was called City Service. CITIES. And one of the points that I make is it's pretty phenomenal when you think about it. In the past 50 years, how many mergers and acquisitions have there been in this country? And Citgo hasn't been taken over to the point where the name is going to change. Fleet Bank was an American institution for 200 years. Bank of America buys it, they retire the Fleet name. I wonder if another oil company buys if it comes to the point where another oil company buys Citgo, will that company's logo replace the Citgo sign? I don't honestly know. But it is covered in the book.
I'm just wondering if Nuff said, like, did he love baseball? Was it baseball that drove him, or was it the Red Sox, or was it marketing, or did he try out ever for?
I don't have an answer. My guess is that was a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I don't think he was so in love with capitalism that he said, I'm just gonna, leverage these fans for my business. And he wasn't so devoted to the team that he was just going to say, oh, I'll just go as a spectator. I think it's a little bit of everything. And he was a fixture. We talk about community. The Phillies have been a fixture for decades. And there's something different, isn't there, if the Phillies win the World Series, if the Red Sox win the World Series, if the White Sox win the World Series. There's something different because it's very much multi-generational. So you grow up hearing your parents or grandparents talk about these teams, and it's in your blood. And there's a different emotional impact that the teams will have than, say, an expansion team like the Padres or the Mariners. It would be wonderful if they win the World Series. People in Seattle, in the Pacific Northwest, people in San Diego will celebrate, and God willing, someday that will happen. But it doesn't have the long-standing tie to the community. I mean, you can say the San Diego Padres of the Pacific Coast League have that tie, and the Padres of the major leagues capitalized on it. But there's a different emotional pull that the old-time teams have that the newer teams don't. And I say that with the Mets as an exception because the Mets inherited a lot of fans from the Giants and the Dodgers after those teams left in 1957. Anyone else? Comments? Questions? Oh, over here, Diane again.
This is just a personal question, but
Yeah.
were you a Dodgers fan?
I was really a Mets fan.
Okay.
But I followed all the teams. I read voraciously. I still do.
There's
when I-
just a really good book by Doris Kearns Goodwin. I don't know.
Oh,
if
wait
you've
till
read-
next year.
It's
Yeah.
It's just a really good book.
Have you read that?
I have, but I'm.
Did you
I
cry
mean,
at the end?
Oh, yeah, I think.
So did I.
think there's like a tear stain
Yeah.
of water on the, yeah. But I thought maybe you were a Dodgers fan, I was gonna say. If you
Well,
haven't read it,
no,
read it.
my dad was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, and we had a neighbor who was also a Brooklyn Dodgers fan from the old days, and they would talk about the teams. And then, of course, when you're growing up in northern New Jersey and you're hearing Phil Rizzuto call the Yankee games, and he's mentioning the Yankee-Dodger rivalry of the 50s, you start to learn by osmosis, and then you get curious. So you read the biographies for children that were written about Jackie Robinson or Willie Mays and so on. So you learn about the 40s and 50s. That was my first book. It was really a life lesson because I didn't know how deep the love for the Dodgers went with their fan base. I mean, people in their 80s were crying when they're talking to me, saying, David, I'm talking about Jackie Robinson. I feel like I'm 10 years old when I'm talking to you. So it's very similar to my experience with the Red Sox fan base, but the Red Sox are still here. And it was just a joyous experience to have people sharing their memories with me, their grandfather taking them to their first game, or being around for the 2004 World Series and going to the playoffs, and just an outpouring that was so emotional, and it just felt like I was talking to them at the bar or at a diner. I never experienced anything like that since the Dodgers book. Yes?
What's the premise of the 78 book?
Well, it's a month-by-month look at 1978, and my premise is if you were going into a time machine to 1978, I would give you this book to read and tell you this does not cover everything, but it will give you a taste, and it will remind you of what life was like in 1978. So it's mostly baseball. I would say it's about 75% baseball, and then other things that happened in the culture that year. Of course, there's the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry. I'm sorry to tell Red Sox fans, the Boston Massacre, where the Yankees swept, and the first two games they decimated. But there's also disco, great year for Hollywood, Animal House, Superman, right? Other movies you may not remember, American Hot Wax, which was a fictional telling, chronologically inaccurate, but still captured the aura of the early days of rock and roll. The Blizzard, how many of you remember the Blizzard of '78? So we had the same blizzard. So I recount that experience from a personal standpoint, but also chronicle the impact that it had on New England, because it was just a devastating storm. In fact, one of the TV stations in Boston did, I think, a 25-year retrospective in 2003. I don't know of any storm that has inspired a TV station to do an anniversary broadcast where they tell you, hey, remember that storm that devastated us? And it was pretty interesting. So yeah, that one is available. And 1962, same premise, month-by-month look at baseball and American culture. So JFK is in there, Hollywood is in there, The Twist was popular, The Dick Van Dyke Show, etc. It's a fun read. Any other comments, questions, rebuttal? Yes?
How's your card collection?
It's funny you ask that. I just broke out of storage my baseball cards and got a kick out of looking at them. I'm nowhere near complete, and the cards are not in great shape because we would flip them against the wall at school and stuff like that. But it's a good chronology of baseball in that year. When you look at in the back of the card, and it summarized the players' statistics, and sometimes they had a cute little anecdote. I'll get back to it someday, but they're pretty interesting artifacts. And my friend Mark is helping me on what notebooks to buy and how to store them and the specific sleeves to get and so forth. Did I see any other hands? No? Well, the books are available outside. I want to thank you for your time and attention, and Godspeed and go Sox.